pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll with Planet. Body downside of speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of NASA Spaceflight Live, the weekly news show here on the NASA Spaceflight channel. My name is Thomas Burghardt. I'm a reporter for NASA Spaceflight, and I'm joined by two pretty familiar faces. On this side, I never know which side it's going to be. This one, Philip Sloss, the NASA Centers editor for NSF. Philip, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. And over on my other side here, we got Mr. Jack Beyer, photographer, live streamer, Boca Chica, seasonal Boca Chica resident, whatever we're calling him these days. Jack, how you doing?
No complaints. What's up, everybody?
How's it going, everybody? So we are here to discuss this week in space news as always. Of course, this is a live and interactive show, so if you've got questions about stuff we're talking about, feel free to throw them into chat, and if you tag us with @NASASpaceflight, we'll bring those questions into a queue and we'll try to answer them as the show goes on. We've got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. We've got Starship updates as always. We've got a huge amount of International Space Station missions. The ISS getting pretty busy, so we'll talk about that. We've got some updates on the Artemis program. We've got an update on the Mars helicopter Ingenuity. We've got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about, so we're going to dive right in. I believe we're going to start with just a quick launch recap like we usually do, and then we'll dive into some bigger news stories. First and foremost, the first launch of the week was a Long March 4C rocket, actually somewhat of a mysterious launch. We didn't get a lot of info up ahead of time, as China sometimes does, launching the Xi'an 603 satellite. So China continuing their busy launch here. And then back here at the States, we of course had yet another Starlink mission, because that's just how it goes these days. The Starlink version 1 L23 mission lifted off from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral this week. Completely successful launch and landing of the first stage booster, which got back to port today. And 60 new Starlink satellites up in orbit now as SpaceX continues to deploy that constellation. And then the third and final launch of the week is going to tie right into our International Space Station segment, because three new crew members lifting off from Baikonur, Kazakhstan on a Soyuz rocket, the Soyuz MS-18 mission. And that link was supposed to be timestamped. Hold on, let me find the actual launch. There it is. Oh, well, I was a little off. But this is the first of a series of big crew rotations in and out of the space station that we want to talk about a bit. So this bringing 3 astronauts, an American and 2 Russians, up to the space station. And this begins a pretty busy schedule. We've got another Soyuz spacecraft, MS-17, is going to come back down to Earth on Friday, April 16th. And then that will pave the way for the SpaceX Crew 2 mission to launch on April 22nd. Following preceding Crew 1 coming back. So it's a very busy time. And right now, there are actually 10 astronauts on board the International Space Station, which is more than we've had in a very long time. Philip, the last time we had that many people on the International Space Station, I believe, was from the shuttle program, right?
Yeah, this is, what you're talking about. There are 2 direct handovers where the next expedition crew comes up and arrives at the station before the crew that they're rotating leaves, and so we're sort of in the middle of the Russian segment rotation, and then we'll have a USOS crew rotation. We saw this a lot towards the end of the shuttle program. I think the record was 13, where when you had a 6-person station crew, and then there were a couple of missions. I know STS-131, and I believe STS-127, where you had a 7-person shuttle crew. And so, perhaps someday soon they can break that record if we can have more than, what is it, 4 visiting crew vehicles, I guess. But or they could, if they were to bring up, I'm not sure if Dragon or Starliner can bring up more than 4. But if there was some sort of a special vehicle that wasn't necessarily a rotation vehicle, maybe you could bring up a larger crew contingent on it for a shorter duration mission. But Yep, that's we're going to be doing some direct handovers here over the next several weeks.
Yeah, Crew Dragon and Starline are both like nominally carrying 4 people, but they were both designed, I think, much like Orion to carry 7. Isn't Orion supposed to have like a maximum crew capacity that's actually bigger than what they would operationally use it for?
I think at this point they no longer can handle 6. I think the original
Okay.
constellation was they were looking for 6, but then, due to some of the constellation issues, they downsized to I think a maximum of 4.
I'm just
So,
pointing my Ares 1
yes,
poster again, but we don't need to talk
that's
about
yeah,
that.
You
let's
didn't
not
even
talk about
you didn't
that.
even point at it. You caressed it. You caressed your Ares
Yes.
One poster.
So yeah, so the Soyuz missions, of course, carrying up 3 up at a time. So like I said, we've got
Right,
2 Soyuz spacecraft docked right now, and then Crew Dragon Resilience, so that all of them carrying their full complements gives us a total of 10
right.
astronauts on the station.
So I guess we won't have 4 crew vehicles since the Soyuz the Soyuz crew is going to leave I guess before Crew 2 launches.
Right, correct. But so we have 10 right now. Soyuz MS-17 will depart on Friday, April 16th, so that'll go us back down to 7, which is the pretty normal station crew. But then when Crew 2 launches, before Crew 1 comes back, you'll actually have a crew of 4 plus 2 crews of 3,
Right,
so you have 11 astronauts on the space station, so it's like one more person
right.
than we currently have. And then, of course, that will be Crew
Okay,
Dragon Endeavor, and then
right,
Resilience comes back with 4 more back to 7, which is like the standard
right.
crew. But though it'll be crowded up there for a couple days.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Any
Back in I know.
discussion any discussion of Soyuz would, you have to talk about the poking stick that we saw a couple minutes ago. I know. I'm sorry. I just have to throw that in there really quick. Is the poking stick is, part and parcel of Soyuz, and I love watching this thing launch, not least because we get to see the poking stick in action. If you don't know what it is, it's
I'm trying
literally
to find it again.
it's literally a stick that the crew uses to manipulate the controls that they are unable to reach with their hands while strapped in. It's
There's
just
a Korolev cross that we all know and love.
love
Right.
it.
I'm trying to. There was a brief clip of it, and now it's not getting to it. I think it'll come up.
Oh,
But
geez, I hope.
of course, there you go. They're gonna use. Nah, they were looking at iPads and stuff. But you mentioned, a bigger crew vehicle that could carry more than 4 people. I don't know. Are there any large crew-rated vehicles coming up in the future that are, in theory, proposed to
There's
service a
one
space
that's being
station?
designed right
Maybe.
now, I believe. Or,
We
yeah.
might have to touch on that in a little bit. A
Yeah.
couple of super chats that have come through really quick. Red Holly Music. Here's a few bucks for the Get Jack His Own Synthesizers Fund. Oh, and then he makes a baseball joke at the end of that. Listen, we're Mets fans around here, no Yankees fans around here.
I'll
Thank
speak
you
for
Was
for
I
the.
yourself.
was I supposed to have a synthesizer? I didn't get the memo. Is that a joke I
I,
missed somewhere?
I don't know. I feel like I missed that joke too, but you have a Get Your Own Synthesizer Fund apparently.
Sweet.
Uh, and then Jim Kevitt says, "Thanks for another great week of info and commentary. Thank you all for the support. We appreciate it. Got some questions that I definitely want to bring up here, and then we've got some cool photos and stuff that are relevant. Let's see. Here's a good question. Saying Crew Dragon is designed for 7 crew, but NASA will never fly more than 4. Could SpaceX fly more on a private mission? So if you didn't have the same kind of cargo capability, and I'm going to actually bring up a Dragon photo since it's relevant. But if you didn't have an ISS rotation mission, and if you're doing something closer to maybe the Inspiration 4 mission or something like that, where you're not bringing cargo to a station or anything, you could max it out and replace and add those 3 seats back on the bottom. I don't know. Could that be something we see in the future?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think after they do some of these missions like Inspiration 4, that'll give them data on long, standalone missions. Then they can certainly look at it. I guess it'll get a little more crowded in there with 7, or even more than 4, and so it'll be interesting to ask those folks when they're up there, if there's how much space there is when they're up there, to camp out in that for however long that mission's going to fly. So, yeah.
Christian Brown, really quick, thanks for the super chat there. A good question here from Selecto. How many people can the ISS support? So what is the maximum crew? And I know this somewhat
That-
relies on what vehicles are docked to it too, right?
yeah. So that's I don't know the specific answer, but I would imagine that you can you have the ability to do it for some short period of time,
Hmm.
you could go up to. So we were just talking about, well, if you had two uh, commercial crew vehicles, so two Dragons or two Starliners or a mix, Dragon and Starliner, and two Soyuz docked, that would give you 14. And you could certainly use some of the, I believe they have, um, oxygen generation, carbon dioxide removal. They, I believe, have redundant racks for most of those on the U.S. side, and then they also have, additional things they could use, like I think they still have candles that they use for oxygen generation on the Russian segment, and they also have the carbon dioxide removal. So they could surge both the crew and then surge this surge consumable usage if they needed to. I think that you get into the issue of what the value is of having, if you needed to do a lot of repairs, maybe you have to essentially have a construction crew coming up to do some work like they used to do with shuttle, where they were coming up and they were going to do a bunch of spacewalks, um, uh, or that was something like that. But they could handle it. It was just a question of how much do you want to stretch out your consumables, and what's the purpose?
You said they still use oxygen candles on the Russian side sometimes?
Yeah, can you explain that? I'm not sure if I'm familiar.
That's like what they
It's
use on submarines, right? That's
Yeah,
insane.
it's I mean, it's a backup system, but they burn. I mean, I don't think we have any pictures of these, but it's something it's something that they light and burn it, the combustion, one of the combustion products is oxygen. And so that's a way to pump up the partial pressure oxygen, inside, if they need to do that. But that's not their. They've had that. Actually, I'm not sure if they had that on the inside the Soyuz, but certainly I would imagine it goes all the way back to the Salyut stations, and it definitely had it on Mir. And it's something they can use if they needed to, but of course they have a lot of backup supply and a lot of consumables on board, so it's not something that they would use unless they
It's
really needed to.
it's more just like, "Hey, the oxygen level's dropping, let's throw a candle on," or something like that. I mean,
Yeah,
if you watched, Thomas Destin, Smarter Every Day, has a really good series on submarines that he
Those
just,
are fantastic. Highly
yeah.
recommend.
in one of the recent one of those, they did a whole oxygen candle light and replacement, and they discussed all of that, and so check that out whenever you get a chance. It's super fast. That's the only reason I even know what they are, but it's wild to me. I mean, it's one thing to have a burning oxygen producing device on a submarine. That's kinda wild, but to have one on the ISS, I mean, I had no idea. Thanks for that insight, Philip.
It wouldn't be. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's almost the same thing. And it's again, it's if you're talking about sort of density and volume. It might be a little bit easier to pack a certain amount of oxygen supply in a smaller space. So like a submarine would be a good, essentially a really good comparison to what they're doing. We're talking about a really big submarine in space, though. So
What
Yeah,
would be
now
a
we're getting into a Scott Manley video of some kind
yes,
where submarines made it to space somehow.
right.
It would be an over what it wouldn't be sub, it would be an over marine. I don't I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Right.
A
Super, right,
supermarine? No,
Yes,
that's an air.
yes,
Now we're talking about Spitfires. That's an airplane thing.
right.
But another question here: why did all four crew members of Crew One have to get onboard Dragon capsule for the relocation? And that's why I've kept this photo up. So these are the crew of Dragon Resilience on the Crew One mission, and you can see they've got their pressure suits back on while they're sitting inside the space station, and that's because they're about to get in Dragon Resilience. Obviously, this photo's a couple days old, to move it from one docking port to the another. And the reason that every crew kind of stays tied to their respective crew vehicle is because should any sort of evacuation be necessary, that's the way they get home. And so whenever they undock a spacecraft, any crew that is using that spacecraft as their
Right.
lifeboat, their way to evacuate back to Earth, needs to get on board. So they all get on board. It was like a 40-minute relocation or something from one docking port to the other. And the reason they did that was so that when that Dragon leaves, the next cargo Dragon can park there and the Canadarm can reach that docking port to get some cargo out when that gets there. So they did that relocation, and that was right after they relocated a Soyuz spacecraft because Russia is going to launch a new module to the space station soon. And because of some of the work involving that, they needed one of their docking ports to be open and available. So there's a whole lot of busy ISS traffic that has already started, and now we're getting into some crew rotation stuff.
Right.
So it is the
I think we had
case
an.
that
Oh, go ahead.
They do that for both the Soyuz and the U.S. commercial crew
Yeah.
vehicles, any relocation. And so,
Yep.
worst case scenario would be, if you came back and you couldn't dock.
Hmm.
And so, okay, so now you left behind Fred and he's inside and his rescue vehicle can't dock. So that probably wouldn't be that's why they do that.
Hmm.
yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't have like, thought of that right off the top of my head. I'm sure they could probably relocate Dragon autonomously, but then like you said, if there's any kind of issue, then you have crew sort of trapped on the station with no
Right.
lifeboat home or anything. So
Yeah.
interesting.
I think they, for the most, I think they just sit in Dragon and Dragon does its thing. I don't think they were doing much piloting because, like you said, it can do it autonomously. But it's about making sure the crew have a way to get home should docking any problem arise during docking.
I imagine they're in the capsule, and Sochi's like, "Are we there yet?" And then so help me, I will turn this capsule around.
Right. They just bring an iPad and some movies with you.
There you
You
go.
know.
And then another question here: if there was a delay to the Russian undocking, so we're talking about Soyuz MS-17, which has been there for a few months already, could it affect the launch date for Crew 2? I would guess not, because I mean, you have because that like won't affect any docking port availability. The Russians and the U.S. vehicles use completely different docking ports. So if the three Russian cosmonauts, or I guess it was, were they all Russian? Oh no, there was a NASA astronaut. Kate Rubins was on that spacecraft too. But if those three crew members had to stay on station a little longer because they were waiting to come back to Earth, is there a reason that Crew 2 would then sit on the ground a little longer and wait for them to come home before launching?
Yeah, and I don't know that it would. I guess it would have to do with specifics of the situation. So if for some reason they couldn't undock, or if they were stuck or at least temporarily stuck, so to speak, then maybe they could take the opportunity perhaps to bring up some things on the crew too.
Hmm.
If they wanted to manifest something from the Soviet Union from Russia, like a part or some sort of a tool, then they might hold it up. But if it's it shouldn't take too long to do that to get a set of tools if they needed to bring something up like that, something small. But otherwise, yeah, I don't know that there's any other operational reason why they would need to hold up a USOS launch.
This is a great photo, by the way. So this is the crew
Yeah.
of Crew 2 who are preparing for launch, and they are going to be the first crew to launch on a flight-proven Falcon 9 rocket booster 1061, which of course also launched Crew 1 right beforehand. And this is you can actually see they have signed their initials into the kind of residual soot or scorch or whatever that material is that comes on these flight-proven boosters. They've signed their initials into the booster, which is kind of cool.
Nice.
Presuming this is in the hangar at 39A. So paying a visit to their launch vehicle ahead of launch on April 22nd currently. A couple more questions here. When will the Crew 2 undock and deorbit? So Crew 2, again, launching on April 22nd, and the standard rotation is 6 months, right?
Yeah, I we're I thought I thought I saw something where they were talking about maybe doing a little bit longer than that. But yeah, it's about 6 months. The crew the expedition stays for
I don't
I believe
believe.
both sides now. Yeah.
Yeah, and the exact date will kind of come up when the next U.S. vehicle is ready to launch, which will likely be SpaceX Crew 3. Once that crew rotation mission has a launch date, that will get coordinated with Crew 2's return, just like they're doing now, so they can do another direct handover, because I think that will be generally the standard plan going forward. So there's always a U.S. vehicle docked. So that exact date will get pinned down, just like they did for Crew 1 and Crew 2.
All right.
And again, I'm just showing these awesome pictures of the crew with their rocket. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wonder how
one
they're going to do
fine,
that when they get to like crew 7 or crew 10 or crew 13. Their
that
hands are
will,
going to be messy.
yeah, they're going to be really, really dark boosters.
Yeah.
And then thank you, Michael, in the back channel, just saying that the Crew 3 launch date was announced as October 23rd. So if Crew 3 launches then, maybe near the end of October would be a Crew 2 undocking and return. So thank you, Michael, for that. One last question here while we're on the topic of space stations, and it's an interesting one. What are your thoughts on Neutron crewed spaceflight? So talking about Rocket Lab's new rocket, which will be crew rated, um, asking could it get to the ISS or commercial stations? How many people could it take, and will it actually come to fruition? Well, the last part is hard to tell because that requires some future predicting of the future. But it's in the same payload class as Soyuz is, so it could launch, a 3 crew capsule to low Earth orbit. Um, in theory to the International Space Station's orbit. This is not launched until 2024, so some commercial stations would also be available. What do you guys think about a potential newcomer in human spaceflight coming up?
I don't know, Jack. What do you think?
I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited for any sort of new launch vehicles because new is fun and exciting. And I mean, Rocket Lab and Neutron are, you know, they appear to be a very capable vehicle. So I don't really know that I have more thoughts on it other than that. But more rockets is more better.
Right.
Yeah, it
I
would.
mean, is there have they talked about a crew vehicle at this point, or is the rocket just something that they're human rating?
Yeah, so it's mostly on the rocket at this point, and self-plug, talk to Peter Beck. You can check it out on NASASpaceflight.com. There's a whole article with my interview with him. But yeah, he was saying there's not currently developing a crew spacecraft for the rocket. They're working on, from the very beginning of the rocket's development, making sure that all of its systems are designed with human rating in mind. So that should either they develop a spacecraft or another company develop a spacecraft for the rocket, that the rocket is already able to be crew rated. So it's sort of a future proofing kind of concept at this point.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes
But
sense.
yeah, it would definitely be interesting to have another sort of Soyuz class crew vehicle for low Earth orbit. I'm very excited to see how that comes, if it comes to fruition at all.
Hmm.
I'm moving right along here. I'm going to find something else to talk about because I think we've exhausted our low Earth orbit questions. So let's talk about beyond low Earth orbit. Let's talk about Artemis for a little bit. Philip, you've got some news to cover regarding some recent testing getting ready for SLS launches, yeah?
Yeah. Okay, we were going to start with they just did an engine test. They got back into single engine RS-25 testing on Tuesday. It was a 500-second test. This is a development engine which can be fired more frequently. And the story that we just published yesterday talks a little bit about refurbishing engines. That's a little different in terms of refurbishing a development engine like this one. This was engine 0528 versus the 4 flight engines which are on the core stage that were recently fired about 3 weeks ago. This test here was mostly to test just putting more runtime on the production restart components. So this engine was originally built in the shuttle program, and they are basically retrofitting it with RS-25 components like turbopumps, valves, sensor packages. Uh, uh, I think the next one will be, some of the ducting that you see on the power head. That will be uh, as they're putting new components on it and replacing the old ones, and then they test fire them. They're also testing it at the higher production restart power level of 111%. And then this test also is checking out the thrust vector control system on the test stand. So the engine has it has the gimbal mounts, it has the hydraulics, but actually pointing the engine is done by a launch vehicle, by either a stage, or in this case, it's done independently by the test stand. And so this was the second of 7 tests in a series called Retrofit 2. It's actually the second series of 4 series. And then the next test will be they're planning on having another test, test number 3, by the end of the month. So um, then moving over to the other 4 engines that are being refurbished, which we talked about, which is in the core stage. Um, they did the hot fire test that was on March 18th. They got the full duration test. They've been refurbishing the stage and the engines. Again, the stage is the rookie. The engines are the flight proven veterans. So they have a very standard refurbishment timeline and task list for the engines that they've been doing since shuttle, which they've modified for SLS, and then they're doing a little bit more uncharted territory with refurbishing a stage after it's been fired. In this case, for 8 minutes, so a lot of TPS refurbishment and things like that. But what we just learned today, we got some new data. It's on L2 for those of you who are L2 subscribers.
NASASpaceflight.com/L2. Check it out.
We need a bell when we plug ourselves like that. But they have a review called break of configuration after all of these test cases, and they actually there were 8 test cases, but then they also called test case the refurbishment they called test case 9. They had the break of configuration review a week ago on April 2nd, and basically they said, okay, we're good to proceed. They have all the data they need. We're good to proceed into finishing refurbishment and getting the stage ready to take out of the stand and put on the barge and send to Kennedy. So that's basically what's going to happen next. So taking out of the stand and then the tow trip on the Pegasus barge to Kennedy are a little bit weather dependent. The removal from the stand requires very light winds, and so when they put it in the stand, it took them about a week to find a day where they had the light enough winds to do that. So we'll see how that goes. But hopefully here in the next week and a half, they'll be ready to do that. And then they'll just have to keep their fingers crossed that the weather's good. But they'll take it out, they'll rotate it back to horizontal. They've got a transporter that they'll stick it on. They'll roll that into the barge and they'll be ready to go. And then, they'll have to obviously look at the maritime weather, but they can at least move around that a little bit. So it should take about a week once they get going to get from the New Orleans area around the Florida Peninsula to Kennedy Space Center. So, and right now, again, in this L2 document that we just got, they're projecting that after they get to Kennedy, they'll be ready to have the core stage lifted up and mated to the boosters in the VAB sometime around May 11th is what they're talking about right now. So then the other sort of status update was on the rest of the Artemis 1 vehicle. So the Orion, we got a little bit of an update yesterday. This is a picture. Orion is on the right here. You can see with the NASA and the ESA logos. And then on the left is the SLS upper stage, the ICPS, interim cryogenic propulsion. Is it stage or system?
Stage, I think, yeah.
Stage, yeah. It's a Delta IV upper stage that they did a hydrogen tank, they stretched the hydrogen tank by like 18 inches, but it's basically it will become a human rated Delta IV upper stage. Those are both in this facility called the Multi-Payload Processing Facility, and Orion is first up. It's getting all of the commodities it needs for flight. So they've already loaded things like nitrogen, helium. They did a test load of ammonia. But then the big thing that people think of is the fueling. So they just finished the service module oxidizer load. It's a hypergolic thrusters, so nitrogen tetroxide and monomethyl hydrazine. They did the tetroxide load, and they're getting set up to do the monomethyl hydrazine load next. And then they'll load helium into the crew module tanks, and then they will load the reaction control system hydrazine. I believe the RCS thrusters on the crew module, which they would use basically from that period right before they re-enter after they separate from the service module. These are monoprop thrusters, and so they just take a hydrazine, a version of hydrazine that they I think run through like a catalyst bed, and so that's what's next. So they'll do the service module hydrazine, or crew module. I'm going to get those mixed up all the time. Crew module, gaseous helium, and then crew module, hydrazine. And then they should be ready probably, they'll probably be looking at where the core stage gets stacked in, hopefully next month, about when they start being ready to move. It'll go over to a facility to get the launch abort system put on top, and then it'll be ready to go into the VAB for stacking. So that's kind of where we are right now. There's always they're working on Artemis 2, Artemis 3, Artemis 4. We're starting to see Artemis 4 hardware, but we got a lot of time to talk about that over the next several years. So, but that's kind of where we are right now with that. We also, I guess, I will mention the skinny budget, the president's budget proposal for fiscal 2022, which would officially start on October 1st. This is a new administration, so they usually the full request doesn't come in February because it would be just a couple of weeks after they start. This is what's being called a skinny budget request because it just has a few top line numbers, but just to go over let me see if I can bring this up.
Yeah, I've got it coming up on screen here. This is the actual document.
Well, so Artemis, so the top line for NASA, they got 24.7 billion approximately, which is about $1.5 billion above the fiscal 21, what was actually passed by Congress and signed by President Trump. Artemis would get an additional 325 million above what it got in the last budget that was passed, which is currently with the current fiscal year that we're in. The other programs that got increases were space technology got 325 million. Aeronautics got 86 million above their enacted level, 250 million above the enacted level for Earth science, and then also another 20 million above their for STEM and education. And so obviously everybody's going to be really interested, not just within Artemis, but then all of the details to see all of the top lines underneath those once we get those. Hopefully maybe next month we'll get to see what the president proposes, and then Congress will dispose of that. But that's something that came out yesterday, I believe. So
yep.
And it was good to see that it wasn't a flat budget, or that they were going to be cutting. They had to cut back on the top line, so that was good.
And also check this out right underneath. NSF is actually in the White House budget, guys. Did you guys see that? We get money? No, I'm kidding. That's different NSF. But
yeah, I've seen NSF on fire hydrants too. So yeah.
But and by the way, Jack, I think we've got you back now. Are you good on comms? Can you hear us? Okay? Can we hear you?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Oh God, I can't hear Jack. Wait, why can I not hear Jack? Wait, Philip, you can hear Jack?
Yes, I can.
Wait, if Thomas.
Wait, I hear Jack now.
Thomas can't hear me. Aries won bad. Oh wait, he can hear me. Crap.
I can hear you now, Jack. That was too late. Too late. We've got Jack back, and we are just in time to take some questions because we've had a whole bunch of Artemis questions. I'm gonna pull up some. I'm gonna pull up this Orion and ICPS photo again because it's so cool. Those are both for Artemis 1, right? Those are not future.
Correct.
Ones,
right.
Yeah,
of course, you can't see the what they're going to be fueling in the NPPF. But let's go to questions.
Okay.
Rather than me bore you with details as usual.
Oh, it was always good for the awesome Artemis updates. We've got a question here from Claire asking about when Gateway will get to the moon's orbit. I believe that is still kind of off the critical path for the first moon landing. If their Gateway isn't there yet, they will instead just dock Orion straight to the moon lander, right? Is that still kind of the plan?
Sort of.
Okay.
I guess so the specific question right now, the no earlier than date for launching the first two Gateway elements is May of 2024. And so NASA combined the power and propulsion element and the HALO, I apologize, for the acronym they're calling, and for another acronym, they're now calling that a co-manifested vehicle, since they're going to be integrated and launched together. So the PPE and the Halo, PPE is Maxar, Halo is Northrop Grumman. Um, those will launch hopefully in 2024, and then they will use the PPE's solar electric propulsion system to spiral out of this a very egg-shaped, high apogee, low perigee uh, insertion orbit to the near rectilinear halo orbit around the moon, and that will take about a year, because now that you still have the PPE that now has to handle a combined stack that's, I think, over twice the mass, and so it's also going to be going to a slightly lower insertion orbit. So it should take about a year, but hopefully it will be on station in lunar orbit, or semi-lunar orbit, a halo orbit,
Right.
in the middle of 2025. And so that's, so yes, because, so to back up, kind of to bring the budget thing back in, the human landing system program got much less than they requested. Last year they requested about 3 billion, they got 850 million. And so pretty much everything after Artemis 2 is under review again. So Artemis 1, unmanned lunar orbit flight. Artemis 2 is basically a first Orion crew checkout, and so they'll do this funny 3 orbit mission where they do a single low Earth orbit, a single high Earth orbit, and then they essentially orbit around the moon. But that's just a lunar flyby, and then they'll come back. But the reason that they're not going into lunar orbit on that one is just because it's the first flight with crew. They want to make sure that that the Orion crew systems work. But then after that, Artemis 3, now we have to see what they can do in what time frame for the human landing system, given the budgets that they're going to be getting. So um, Gateway got most of the money that it requested last year. So hopefully they can hold that mid 2024 launch date.
And really quick, this render is from NSF's Matt Crawford of like you said, that co-manifested. It's got the power module on the left and then a habitat module on the right, and that is inside an extended Falcon Heavy payload fairing on the
Right.
Falcon Heavy up in stage. So will be launched by SpaceX, like you said, kind of 2024, getting to orbit by 2025 kind of time frame. And
Right.
I know we're all looking forward to seeing that launch.
Hmm.
We got another question here, kind of similar, about what are our thoughts on Falcon Heavy being a crewed spacecraft, possibly supplying the future Lunar Gateway station. So Crew Dragon can currently only get to low Earth orbit on Falcon 9. If SpaceX was going to evolve that to a deep space transport, that's not an entirely new concept. If you remember, the current mission that we call Dear Moon, which is like a Starship crew mission to Moon and back, was actually originally, before it was called Dear Moon, going to be just 2 crew members on a Gray Dragon, a lunar version of Crew Dragon, launched on Falcon Heavy. But there was a whole bunch of modifications and stuff they had to do to make that happen. Crew Dragon is kind of not meant to be a deep space transport vehicle. It's supposed to be low Earth orbit, and that's kind of why they, I think, ended up moving over to Starship, is because Starship is really meant to go to those kind of deep space destinations. So I don't know if we'll see a crew-rated Falcon Heavy at this point. It's really good for launching big, heavy payloads or payloads that need to go to far distances, but not necessarily as a crew vehicle. And again, that's still, they're not going to launch Orion on Falcon Heavy. They looked at it; it's not really doable. So that's also kind of off the cards at this point. But a good question there. And we had a couple super chats and stuff to come through. Tony with the new membership, thank you so much. And then Lily saying a tribute to Yucca and Jack's beard. Appreciate the super chat there.
Yeah, Chad is going insane over my beard, which I did not expect.
Well, it's been a couple episodes since you've been on camera for an NSF live, so people might not have realized you've got the beard going now.
Yeah, that's fair. The beard is at full power. We're at 109% on thrust on the beard.
Right. Yeah. If you
that's
don't do
that's
something
another.
about it, you're going to get to 111%.
That's a quick question, Philip. Can you explain why? And I'll pull up the videos again. Why, when we're saying like, oh, this engine's running at 109%, that seems wrong. Shouldn't it only be able to run at 100%? Can you explain why that number's slightly off?
It's just the the engine was designed in the 1970s, and when it was originally designed, it was designed to a particular thrust rating. So 100% equates to 375,000 pounds of thrust. Sorry, I'm using SI units. But this is just how these are the things I remember off the top of my head. Then, basically NASA, as I think I recall hearing a Rocketdyne person say, as soon as you finish, NASA wants more power, and so they started testing to 109%, and that was kind of a limit for the hardware in the 1980s. And so the shuttles flew at 104%, and then eventually at 104.5%. But it's really just, it's just a higher thrust level. And so, kind of like Jack's beard. So now Jack, if Jack just keeps going, Jack's beard's going to get longer. And so, they can now fire these engines at 100. The first 4 flights will go at 109%, and then they will this engine was tested at 111%, which is where they'll be for the production restart engines. And then on the ground, they test them a couple of percent above for margin purposes. So if you can run the engine 2% higher, 113%, and demonstrate that it operates within specifications, that gives you this extra margin that they always like to have on human-rated vehicles.
Really, really quick, what is that little arm right there, Philip? Is that like a sparkler system to burn off excess
Right,
hydrogen, or
that's
what is?
that's the single engine Rofi thing, except I don't think it's not a sparkler thing. I think it's just like it's probably more like a pilot light on a gas stove. But the same idea where, these engines are starting, a lot of engines like fuel rich mixture ratios, and so it's not quite like a RS-68 start, but there is a lot of hydrogen. There's a hydrogen lead and for start and a hydrogen lag for shutdown. And so I don't know if we have time here, but if we get to the shutdown, you'll see. Actually, you see the shutdown, and this was in the story that we just talked about, where um, it shuts down hydrogen rich, and you can see the engines actually already shut down here. But what's happening is that they then push a whole bunch of helium through the engine power head to try and evacuate any propellant that's still stuck in there, any residuals. And so, as you push that hot gas out through the engine bell, it's still nice and hot, so it continues to burn, but it's not really producing. It's still producing thrust because you have ignition, but you have an ignition source, but the engine's not really running at that point. It's just you're just flushing all of the residual propellant out of it, and a lot of that's hydrogen because of because the engines just like you really prefer to have a higher fuel ratio in your mixture than generally speaking. I mean, you've got oxygen rich combustion engines, but those run hot, and so definitely these engines you don't want to get too oxygen rich on them, because then they start burning the engine instead of instead of the fuel.
And then you start burning engine rich, which is never a
Yes,
good thing.
right. You start leaning real hard engine rich when you get into the oxygen rich scenario.
A couple more super chats that have come through. Dougal says Jack Blackbeard with his kayak pirate ship for the win.
So
Jack,
many
your
memes.
your beard is getting super chats now.
It's all the memes. My
And
my face is running very beard rich today.
Yes.
there you go. And Kyle with the super chat as well. Thank you so much for all the support, guys. We appreciate it. Really quick, we've got another quick update here. This is actually some recent news. I'm going to pull up this photo. We got some news from another deep space destination, not so much the moon, but talking about Mars. We can say that NASA is reporting that the Ingenuity helicopter, the first attempt at heavier than air lift generating flight, they keep saying it's the first powered flight. I would argue that every time we fired a rocket engine on a landing on Mars, that was technically powered flight. So I'm saying, lift generating flight, airfoil flight of some kind. A helicopter, in this case, is now delayed to no earlier than Wednesday, April 14th. And we'll be keeping a close eye on that because that will be very cool to follow as Ingenuity makes its first flight. Hashtag WinHop. But we'll keep an eye on that. And I think we are going to move on to Boca Chica, Texas for some more updates on there. I guess I'll start with some Starship SN15. That is, of course, the main topic of conversation as the latest Starship vehicle to roll out. If I can get the video to load, there it goes. So, of course, all of this footage courtesy of Mary Boca Chica Gal, as well as some of the robots down in Boca Chica. There might be some residual Jack Beyer footage in here as well somewhere. But
Residual.
Sorry,
but
gotta flush that stuff out. Yeah.
But yeah, so of course, chat if you've got questions, but we'll give a brief update. Starship SN15 has rolled out to suborbital pad A in advance of its test campaign. We'll expect some sort of cryo-proof testing and then a static fire, and then they'll get ready for flight. Likely another 10-kilometer flight test like the previous Starships. However, SN15 is kind of the new, or the first of a new sort of series of Starships that have a bunch of upgrades that have been implemented. I know the Raptors have been upgraded. There's a new thrust puck design, and there's Elon said there's something like hundreds of fixes that they've put in. There are only a couple that we know of, and some of them might be very, very minor. But some new upgrades that could hopefully, potentially at least, make Starship SF-15 have a little bit better odds of sticking the landing. Of course, that's what we're all hoping for. But SM-15 out at the launch site, and that's going to be the big topic to focus on. They're also continuing to develop the orbital launch site as they get ready for that kind of attempts coming up later this year. We're also keeping an eye on when will Super Heavy BN2 start stacking, because that might be the first actual flight test article for Super Heavy. So we're looking out for that. We've seen pieces of Starship SN20, which is the first orbital Starship. So there are some components for that sitting out and about in Boca Chica. So there's a lot of really cool things. You can see this is a ground support equipment tank, a GSE tank, getting ready to go to the orbital site. But and just
Yeah,
like I thought, now that I've tuned back to the panel page, we've got questions. So perfect.
A lot of people always ask, what is a GSE tank? What does GSE mean?
Mhm.
Really, it's just a fuel tank. And we generally don't say fuel tank because these things can also contain things like nitrogen or liquid oxygen. Liquid oxygen, of course, being a oxidizer, not a fuel, but propellant. So yeah, it's the same thing as the tank farm that we know and love and closely watch. Oh God, I've gone crazy. Okay, there we go. I'm back.
It's
Um,
fixed.
it's the same thing as the tank farm on the suborbital side, but they are building
Mhm.
these tanks with the same construction method and materials as Starship. So that's why they look like they do. They're not going to do any kind of SN5 or SN6 style, hops with these things. At least, hopefully not, barring any kind of unforeseen issues. But yeah, that's what those are. And here you can see SN15 crawling out of the high bay there slowly but surely.
Slowly but surely, absolutely. Let's see. All right. Let's give a brief status update before we get to SN15 because we've got a question in here. How are the cameras after SN11's flight? I believe we can report that we only had one fatality from SN11, and that was a single solar panel, right?
Yeah, and it was just a small little hit on the solar panel too. Like the entire panel seemed fine. They even have little lights on them that indicate that power is being generated. Like basically the second you take the panel out of its wrapper, that little blue light comes on whenever any kind of light
Hmm.
hits it. So it was still generating power, but we removed that panel from the array just to, avoid any kind of issues. And this is a cool shot here, really quick, just because that's the lifting squid. We call that thing the lifting squid, and I don't know that we've seen that so up close before. Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot there, but yeah,
No, you're good.
that's the device that they use to attach to the nose cone to lift SN15 onto the mountain right there. It's pretty nifty.
And then I believe
And
later
they're
in this
doing it
video
right
we
there.
will see footage of the lift itself, so we'll get to that in a second. There's also this blunt nose cone thing. So there's a weird nose cone that doesn't have the tip on it. And there's been a couple questions about this, about what that could be for. I believe we have a
That's a
new here we
that's a
go.
hydraulic ram getting lowered in there, right? That's like a little mini thrust
Oh, let me go back.
simulator kind of thing, or at least just maybe not thrust, but that looks like another hydraulic ram going down and being placed
It might
inside.
be.
So I'm not sure if there's like a half of a header tank in there, and they're going to do some kind of structural testing or what, but it definitely seems like a test nose cone. We're not quite sure what they're testing or why they're testing, but certainly seems like yeah. And then this, look at that. It's like it's got
Yeah,
a
so they then put this on top and kind of covered the blunt part of the nose cone, and
yep.
yeah, I think it's like some sort of structural test article of some kind. They're going to apply some force on like this, maybe like a half header tank, or maybe just the nose cone in general. Um, I wish I had a better like speculation than that, but it's kind of hard to tell. But
And
some
it
sort of
has
like load testing.
that cap has those 3, yellow and black, like, crash test
Mhm.
looking type stickers. Those could just be, hazard indicators, or sometimes I see stuff like that and I wonder, is that gonna be used for, I think it's oh god, I hate this word. It's like photogrammetry or something, it's
Yeah, yeah,
basically
yeah.
where you put a bunch of known reference marks on a structure, and then after it has been stressed, you take photos of it, before and after, and you can see minute changes in the placement of those known indicator. I mean, I've seen that on various aircraft too. When they're testing aircraft, they'll basically cover it in little dots and then a super high resolution image it, and then when it's being tested, you can see, okay, it is moving in this way, either expected or unexpected. I don't know. I wonder if those markings are for anything other than just eyeball indicators. But either way, super interesting to see what they're going to do with this nose cone.
And we got another like speculation in the questions asking, could this blunt nose cone be some sort of docking prototype, either for the ISS or for Lunar Gateway? Does this have anything that might say like there could be testing putting a docking port on the nose? Because I think the human landing system version, the docking port is on the nose, but then SpaceX has made renders where it's like Starship docked to the station kind of shuttle style, where there's a docking port on the side somewhere.
Yeah,
But that was also kind of a notional render, so I don't know. I mean,
I mean,
to
it could
me, this
be.
doesn't look like a docking port thing, but
I think we can safely say, or that we do know. I mean, I've been told by astronauts at Boca Chica who are sort of observing. I think it was SN9, that the lunar, the human landing system vehicle does not have header tanks, at least not in the nose cone. Um, so yeah, that could very well be some sort of structural test article to see, what if we put a docking port here? Can it, how does that affect the structural integrity of the nose cone? Under these loads, does the thing collapse? Because if you're attaching something at the tip, like we're looking at right now, versus on on the dorsal side or on the leeward side, whatever you want to call it, there's going to be different stresses on the entire
mhm.
structure, right? So that might be something, and that might be something they need to test. It's hard to say. Hopefully, we get a little bit of color there on Twitter from Elon or something along those lines. It's yet another item around the build site and launch site that we sort of just have to look at and speculate until we get a firm answer.
Philip, I've got a shuttle angle question regarding this because I'm thinking about this docking article kind of idea, and like we saw for Gateway, it looks like the docking port's on the nose, so it would kind of look like a super oversized dragon that just docks from the nose of it. But shuttle docked kind of sideways because the docking port was as part of the payload bay. Is there any reason that one would be preferred over the other? Like, was shuttle docking sideways have any weird requirements or challenges that they had to work through? Or would there be any reason that Starship might want to avoid that and do a nose docking? Or is there any sort of historical precedent for that?
Well, the thing I was thinking of while you guys were talking was, if you tried to do that at the station, with such a large vehicle, if you get into I mean, not, we're not talking about like jet fighter controllability, but just in terms of maneuvering or doing attitude control for the station stack, if you had a Starship docked nose docked versus like that, it you might it might be more beneficial to go one way or the other. It just again depends on the mass, and whether who's going to drive the stack there, because obviously in that kind of thing, the Starship, same with the shuttle. I think, well, I'm not sure, but with Starship, when shuttle was docked in that way, the thrusters on the orbiter they had to use they could only use, I think, the vernier thrusters when they were docked, and anything else was going to, was going to be a problem for the solar arrays. You could
Yeah, it would fire into
you
other
could
parts of the
yeah,
station, right?
you could plume the solar arrays hard enough to overstress them, and so now with the gateway, uh, it may not be uh, as big of a deal, which way they dock. It's an interesting question because you have different requirements. So, we were talking about the Artemis missions being kind of under review. They were talking about Artemis 3 being no gateway. So if you were going to dock an Orion, that's not such a big deal. But now Starship might have to support different types of docking, uh,
Hmm.
uh, you know, uh, multiple docking adapters, nose, maybe,
Hmm.
like you said, like a dorsal or a ventral or um, something like that, where it would dock differently if it was docking to a smaller spacecraft like Orion's not not that small, but the Orion versus the Gateway versus the space station, for instance. So, yeah, I would wonder if you were to dock it differently than this in this illustration, if you run into issues with either Starship, in terms of uh, proximity operations, in terms of firing thrusters, either as you separate or you close to dock. If you were to do it nose, a nose docking here, would you run into any issues in terms of which jets you would be able to use? Uh,
This is a slightly
that's an
older render
interesting.
back when it was
But
BFR, but it just kind of
that gives you a good
showcases how
idea.
ridiculous it
Yeah,
would look.
It's
yeah,
such a beautiful. I love this version of it. It looks so cool.
It does look
Um,
very cool.
yeah.
and
That would look pretty cool
I'm
if
getting
you got
flashbacks from, like, playing Kerbal and attaching finally docking to a large station that I've built, and then you forget to turn off certain engines, and you hit, shift or whatever to try and accelerate or change your orbit slightly, and then, like, 2 opposing engine sets fire, and then you just tear the whole space station apart. Like, yeah, you definitely don't wanna do that in real life. It's bad enough in Kerbal.
yeah.
But yeah, so definitely, I mean, so back to the main question of like, is that testing thing a docking port thing? I'm going to not rule it out, but to me, it looks like some sort of stress analysis kind of deal. And then we got another question about something else in that photo. So also, this ties into, remember a couple episodes ago we were talking about what this mystery structure is. You can see it down at the bottom here. It's part of this sort of structural testing setup that they've got going on. What are they doing? I don't know. Some sort of testing, but that mystery structure is apparently part of this too. Um, and then we had another question here about what is the white nose cone by the high bay, which is also in this photo just to the right. This is the original Lunar Starship mock-up nose cone thing. You can just see the edge of the oh god, I zoomed way too far in. There you go. The a bit of the US flag and the NASA worm logo. So they've kind of got the paint scheme going on of Lunar Starship as well. And previous photos have shown on the inside of this, they have some mock up like bunk beds and crew quarter kind of deals. So they're working on figuring out what kind of a crew cabin of a lunar lander version of Starship would look like, which of course will not only help them with the Artemis program, but could also, I mean, help them figure out their own private Starship ambitions, how that kind of crew quarters would look like. There would be kind of silly not to leverage all of the experience that NASA and their astronauts and crews can leverage. So that's what you're looking at there. That white nose cone is a lunar lander mock-up test situation thing. Easy with the
Yeah,
technical
I mean,
terms
it's
there,
one
Thomas.
thing to Yeah. It's one thing to have a VR,
Hmm.
mock-up that you can mess around with, and that's certainly useful, but to have a physical thing that you can walk up to and, gaze at with your own eyes and actually look at and say, "Holy cow, look how
Hmm.
big this thing is." I mean, there's value just in that, right?
Yeah.
And also there's value in literally just having it there, visible for all the public to see, with the United States flag on it, with the worm on it, worm gang, team worm, um, worm better than meatball. I'm just gonna keep
Michael,
pushing
can
my
we
luck
cut
here
Jack's mic really
before you
quick?
mute me. Um, but for real, it's basically a giant advertisement, not just to NASA, not just to visiting astros, but to the public. That this is a real thing, and this is exactly what it would look like, you know, Buy it.
Yeah.
Fund it. Please fund it.
And we know we've seen a lot of astronauts and NASA personnel down in Boca Chica, so they're clearly keeping an eye on it. And we are getting close to the point
Yep.
where NASA will be ready to announce which moon landers they are moving forward with, Starship, a Starship variant being one of them. So we'll keep an eye on it. But in the meantime, let's see. We got some more questions here. Storm with a super chat. Thank you so much. Saying a crew variant pressure vessel would also not need a header tank to stress test. Um, I'm trying to think if I understand the point there. We know the lunar variant of Starship won't have header tanks because it doesn't do the belly flop maneuver, so it can just land based on propellant from the main tanks. Um, there's not. I don't know if we know either way if another crew variant of Starship will have header tanks or not. Because if it's going to do a belly flop landing, I think it needs the header tanks.
Yep.
Although they could relocate them somewhere, they don't have to be in the tip of the nose cone. I don't think we have any further confirmation on that though.
I think what they might be saying, or thinking is that this test nose cone appears to have or could have a half of a header tank, even though the tip
Hmm.
is not there. So maybe they're lowering in that thrust ram into part of a header tank, and so maybe maybe it's not a crew variant with a dock in the nose cone. Maybe it's just a structural test article with a half of a header tank for whatever reason.
Gotcha. We'll definitely keep an eye on it. Let's see. Yeah, here's a great question. Is SpaceX really going to catch boosters? So, Elon recently on Twitter has been discussing the idea of designing out the landing legs on super heavy boosters and maybe even starships, and instead having some sort of ground equipment that secures the booster as it kind of descends under power. Whether that be a giant tower with catch arms or something like that. The question being, are they really going to do that? I personally am. I don't know. I think I'm on the fence. If they wanted to go that route, I don't doubt that they could do it. I just don't know if I understand if that's the smarter decision than just having landing legs. What do you guys think?
I mean, remember that time they were going to catch fairings with ships, and now they're not anymore?
There was that.
What it, we got to come up with like a variant of the best laid plans of mice and men. It's like the best laid plans of Musk and men, don't always come to fruition, or so whatever the rest of that quote is. But yeah, I mean, maybe they will, maybe they won't. We'll just have to see what happens.
I don't know. I
Uh,
mean, if they're trying,
you
go
can see
ahead,
some.
Jack.
Go ahead. I'm just commenting
Yeah.
on the visuals that we're looking at now. Some cool shots from the robots as SN15 rolled out.
Let's see here. Derive with a super chat with a shout out to Wayward Plane from the Space Fam. So shout out to both of y'all. Thank you, Derive, for the super chat, and Wayward Plane if you're watching. Appreciate the support to both of you. Let's.
We don't appreciate you being wayward, though.
No range violations around here. Let's see. Um, Here is an interesting question from Joseph asking, after seeing the CNN article earlier this week, we know Jack talked to CNN about what it's like covering Starship and things like that. I know that's on our respective social medias somewhere. But a good question about what other programs should get the same attention as Starship. So in that piece, I know Jack, you talked a lot about how Starship is the potential to kind of have Apollo levels of effects on humanity. I mean, could be such a game changer for the world. Are there other spaceflight programs that could have that kind of impact, either in the near term or way down the line? Are there other things that might have that impact?
Yeah, I mean, while we're on the subject, I would just like to make clear, if you guys have never done an interview with the media or with the news, everything that you say isn't necessarily used. They'll talk to you for a bit and they'll pick and choose little bits that they like that suit their needs for the story, that they include in the story. And I definitely don't want to make it seem like this is only a Starship thing. I think that we are in an entire era right now with all of the different vehicles and the government will and the public will. It's a multifaceted thing. So I mean, I know we all have our qualms with Orange Rocket for being expensive, but I think SLS is huge, not in just literally, but also, SLS is going to do good things, even though it expensively so. And I mean, we were talking about Neutron earlier. Neutron is,
Hmm.
super interesting. All of this stuff, whether it's Virgin Galactic's new spaceship, whether it's anything Blue Origin is doing. I mean, we try and cover everything space flight, and it just so happens that SpaceX and Starship are the most prolific right now and the most public. I'm sure Blue Origin is working their butts off doing all kinds of cool stuff, but they're
Yeah.
so tight-lipped. They're so, they'll show you the final product when it's done and ready, right? And so I certainly think that there's plenty of attention to go around, and there's plenty of ability for us and other organizations to focus on a variety of vehicles and programs. It's just we are spoiled, right, with Starship and the fact that it's literally roadside rocket science. I mean, look at this. This is Mary on the side of the road across from the launch site, filming this next generation rocket roll out. I mean, you just don't get this anywhere else. I mean, I've been to Blue Origin's Corn Ranch facility just to sort of scout it out in case I end up being in the area for a launch, and it's not even close. I mean, it's their test site, right? It's their version of Boca Chica. It's even in Texas, even in West Texas, but the closest you can get is miles and miles and miles away. I mean, I think I had a 600 millimeter lens on, and I was fully zoomed in, and it's like, oh look, I think that's the launch tower way out there. Like,
Right.
so it's not that we think that Starship should get all the attention. It's just it's the thing that is most visible that we can cover right now, and by virtue of that, it's also the thing that the public knows the most about, and the public is most excited about. So yeah, just long-winded way of saying I think basically any other program. I mean, later on this month, there's going to be a Delta Heavy launching a spy satellite from Vandenberg Air Force Base. That's awesome. I love that kind of spooky government stuff. Like that is my bread and butter. I absolutely love Vandenberg for that reason because who knows what this stuff is going to do in space? Maybe we'll find out in 30 years from now what kind of awesome, insanely high tech stuff was being launched at this point in time, or even even like say, I don't know, Stratolaunch. Like that's not even a
Mhm.
rocket, but there's all kinds of things that we can cover and that we like to cover. It's just again, Starship is just the most visible.
Very good point.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think, I mean, to me, I think, that's a big point, which is to say that SpaceX, everybody's doing this type of work, but SpaceX is the one that is, I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but they let the public see what they're doing. And like you said, all of the other programs, including, I obviously spend most of my time on the government programs, but you know, I I think what Jack was saying is true, which is if we had been given more access, we would have taken it.
Hmm.
Even 10 years ago, and that's it's up to whoever. So government has their own set of regulations that might be a little bit more of an outlier, but there are other commercial companies who it's really, it's their call. I think we would have been there, and we probably still would show up uh, for any of these companies, and even
Yep.
NASA, if they would let us cover, if they would let us go at least closer to what SpaceX is doing, at least move
Hmm.
in that direction. So
Yeah.
it's I to me, I obviously I'm biased, but I prefer the way SpaceX does this part of what they're doing
Hmm.
than
Yeah.
compared to NASA.
Yeah, and just a little anecdotally, I mean, I have shot for a few unnamed space companies that you've probably heard of, or at least alongside them or with
Right.
their blessing. And a lot of times, it's like, "Hey, can I point my camera at this?" And it's like, "No, ITAR," right? Like ITAR is the cudgel that is used by companies to limit imagery access and other access to their equipment. And for whatever reason, SpaceX, they'll transport a Raptor down the highway without any kind of covering or what have you on it. So it's just a matter of, like you said, SpaceX appears to be the most comfortable with sort of laying it all out there, and all we can hope for is that other companies sort of get on the same train, and we can get similar access, and we can get more people fired up about all kinds of spaceflight, and not just one
Right.
particular program. Because again, I've said it already in this broadcast once: more rockets is more better.
Yeah. I mean, I like I said, I think the only thing I would just modify there, just repeat what I'm saying to some extent, is just more. How about a little more access? How about, or just not a little more? How about more access? And you don't have to do as much as SpaceX, but how about
Just
more
more.
than nothing?
Yes, yeah,
you know,
anything more than 1% or 0% is a
yeah,
huge improvement. Give us 10% access, that'll be like, "Oh my god, wow,"
yeah,
like,
because they are. I mean, these. I guess it's you can. To be fair, these vehicles that they're building that we're looking at on screen here are so big. It would be hard to build
It'd be hard
indoors.
not to see them. That's true.
Well, yeah, I mean, so, the government vehicles, for the most part, these types of things are done indoors,
Mhm.
and so that gives you a natural hiding place. But, you know, we would be happy to go inside and take a look at some of these types of things. Uh, you know, I I have to say, most of the times that I've been at Michoud when they're putting SLS vehicles together, we don't. It's like we don't get to we don't get to take any pictures, or
Mhm.
I've seen that mentioned more than once. I was on a tour at so and so place, and I really wish we could have taken pictures or showed you what we were seeing, because it was really cool. So it isn't just NASA. It's pretty much everywhere else except for Boca Chica.
yep.
Yeah. And I know I am definitely looking forward to, at least when the core stage starts to get over to my side of the country here in Florida, I hope that there will be some decent media events about when the stage gets here, when it rolls into the vehicle assembly building and they start stacking things. I know they've done some pretty good ones for the boosters, which are what's in there now. So I hope that continues with other Artemis 1 preparations, because I'm telling you, that's the access that we're looking for, and we'd love to share even more of that. So,
Philip,
um,
was that your video of SLS being rolled around that was, like, I don't know, the last couple of months? Was that you that shot that?
The
Um,
the one in New Orleans, probably the one, basically where it's probably the last time I'll get that close to the vehicle. Is, yeah, they're basically towing it out to the barge. I mean, that was January of last year, but it probably doesn't seem so long ago, but it was just, that was pre-COVID. But,
yep,
I think, we've had this problem since before COVID, so it's not, you
yeah.
can't you
yeah,
can't
that's
put it
not a
on
new thing.
COVID. Yeah, can't
I
put it
just
on COVID.
I just bring
But
that up because,
yeah,
that was such an amazing video, and the views that you got were freaking awesome.
yeah.
And it really, gave you a sense of scale for SLS. It really let people see
Is there
how
something I
large
can
it is.
search on YouTube to find that video? I think I
I
know
think
which one you're talking about, but
Yeah, sorry to
It's
put you on
on
the
the
spot like
channel.
that, Thomas, but yeah, it's a video on our channel, I think.
hold on. Keep talking, I'll find it.
Because
Yeah,
but
no,
it just goes to show, like, if there was more events like that or more opportunities for that sort of imagery to
yeah,
be shared by the media, maybe the sentiment towards SLS would be. Oh, Chris B just threw it in chat.
I
Um,
found it.
yeah, like,
yeah, so,
maybe people would be a little bit more excited about SLS when they see something like this, and
yeah,
I feel like I'm committing blasphemy a little bit by mentioning and having us show this in the middle of our Starship segment, but I mean, look at
yeah,
Orange
this.
rocket good, okay,
This is
chat? Anyway,
it
continue.
is. I mean, look at this is super cool to see, and yeah, more access like this would only serve to get the public, further hyped up. But was it Michael that said the other day on Twitter, like, if you want people to be excited about what you're doing, bring them along for the ride. Don't
yeah,
just hide. Don't just hide in the shadows.
yeah. And I mean, to me, that's the one thing I don't, I focus on the details, but I will say, when I'm talking to people that work on this, they're enthusiastic, and so, if a 8,000 word article, I've already used up all the words on the details, but I think a lot of people that work on this are enthusiastic about what they're doing, and I do think, we we somebody, I don't want to, I guess I should be careful, but I mean, somebody
Don't
who's
say
working,
anything that'll get you in
well,
trouble,
okay,
Philip,
I'm just
please.
saying, somebody who's working on the B2 test stand, posted some pictures, and I understand there's an export control and
Mhm.
there's a protocol that you have to go through, and those pictures got taken down, but I think that was done innocently, and I think I wish that there was a way to let people show their enthusiasm for what they're doing besides just SpaceX, because I think SpaceX, that's just implicit in letting people watch what they're doing is that they're proud of what they're doing, they're enthusiastic about what they're doing, and they're committed to what they're doing. And I think, you know, I think people on all these different, it's not just NASA either, that they're really enthusiastic about what they're doing and committed to what they're doing. We just don't hear it from anybody or see it from anybody except
Yep.
SpaceX, which is, I think is unfortunate. Not for SpaceX,
Thomas,
but it's unfortunate for everybody else.
yeah. Thomas, fast forward a little bit and show the engine section as it goes by. It's
Oh
so
yeah, sure.
beautiful. What a beautiful piece of hardware.
Well, and so
Um,
just to point out that that transporter that they're rolling it on, that's what they're going to stick it on, and when they take it out of the stand. So that's a kind of a cool remote control vehicle. Those are just
nice.
wireless
Wait, is
joystick
someone
controlled.
walking behind that with like a remote
Yeah.
controller driving the thing?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, I want to
Yep.
do that. How do I
that
Yeah.
is
get that
fun.
job?
Yeah.
There's not
That's
enough
awesome.
stress relief in the world for me to be able to handle doing that. And just to your point, really quick, Philip, I really would like to point out that with a program like SLS or Starship or any of these big aerospace programs or any of the like the rovers we send to Mars or the probes that we send into deep space, that stuff takes a lot of work from thousands of people, and sometimes that is somebody's life work or the bulk
Mhm.
of their
Yeah.
life work. And
Yep.
that is what's keeping them away from their families, or that's what they're getting home from work at night and super tired, and they just plop down on the couch and they don't necessarily have time to hang out with their kids or read them a story or whatever. And anytime you feel like trashing any one of these programs, whether it's SLS or anything that is not SpaceX or Starship, if that's your forte, I mean, just try to imagine the real human cost and human effort that goes into these things, and the fact that, like you said, the people that work on this stuff are excited about it, and it's not okay to just sort of rain on their parade. You can feel however you want about the funding process, how long it's taking, all of that, but you absolutely should recognize the amount of care and hard work from thousands of people that goes into something like this. And if that doesn't make you excited to see it fly and see it work, I don't know what will.
Yeah, and the engineering behind it is impressive regardless. I mean, look at this thing. It's huge. That thing
Yes.
flies.
Yes.
That thing flies off the ground, It's sometimes seeing that is just
Well,
ridiculous.
eventually it will,
Exactly.
hopefully, but yeah,
Eventually it will. All
that's
right, all right, all
yes,
right.
but
We do have some questions to tie in here because let's see. Arafalo asks, why can't you reignite, for example, the RS-25 engines while the Raptor and Merlin engines can? So, Philip, can you talk to like some of the engineering differences between what we're looking at right now, SLS, and the Starship stuff that we're looking earlier, or Falcon 9 rockets and things like that?
well, I can talk. I mean, I'm not a rocket engineer, but um, the RS-25 engines, they're space shuttle main engines. So like those engines that the engines on the back of those four engines flew in the back of space shuttles
Hmm.
for several years, and they the major difference between them is just the engine controller, which was redone from scratch basically. But the RS-25 engines are head start engines, so you need restarting them. Starting them, for one thing, is they need to be within a particular uh, pressure and temperature. They call it a start box. So after they've fired, this is obviously true of the other engines. I think, just to back up, the Merlins and the Raptors, especially the Raptors and the Merlins, come from, there was some technology development done on the Merlins a while before Falcon, but uh, they're both better suited to multiple starts. The RS-25s were designed to be ground started and head started, so you need a lot of helium. You need to do a lot of purging. It just requires a lot of ground support equipment to start them. And so once you've left the pad, you no longer have extra hydrogen. So they're flowing hydrogen and oxygen through the engines to chill them down to the right temperatures, and after you fire them, they warm up. So you'd have to expend a lot. You'd have to bring a lot of extra fuel along, for instance, to chill them back down, to get them back down in their start box. But then you also have the issue now, if you're in if you're in free fall now and you don't have head pressure, now you've got to create sufficient head pressure on the engines to to start them. So there's a couple of different there's a couple of different issues that you have to deal with, and I'm sure there are more than that. But those are some of the issues are you know bringing along enough extra supplies to get them back into a condition where they can start safely, which is going to require a lot of extra propellant, and then also then you have to produce the same types of pressure conditions and temperature conditions for them to start properly. And so, I mean, the basic thing is the basic way, I guess, of looking at it to me is that the Merlins and the Raptor engines were designed to be restarted.
Hmm.
The RS-25 was not designed to be restarted. I mean, you can restart it, but as I mentioned in the article, you have to take a look at it. You have to go in, you have to dry it. So there's another thing. You have to dry them out. One of the things that they do um, a lot of activity on within the first 48 hours after they shut the engines down is to dry them out, because if there's any moisture trapped in the turbopumps or in the power head, that's and when you then again, so now you've got water vapor in there. Now you chill them back down to cryogenic conditions. Now that water vapor is going to turn into something else, and then when you start the engines, you're going to have problems. And so
Hmm.
those are I mean, really just talking about refurbishing the engines. So for a Raptor or a Merlin, your refurbishment time is minutes.
Right.
I mean, they're demonstrating it on all these test flights of the Starship that with the Raptors, it's like the refurbishment time is a couple of minutes, maybe.
Yeah,
It's
on the time
they're
it takes to
it's
fall back
right,
down towards the landing burn,
right.
right? Yeah.
It's ready to fire, pretty much immediately. So it's just just designed for a different uh, multiple uses. The Raptors, for instance. So
And really quick, I want a big, huge shout out to Tim Dodd, our good friend, also known as Everyday Astronaut, because I looked up, I was trying to find, I need to find a picture that has both Merlin Raptor and RS-25 in it. And sure enough, look who came up. This awesome graphic from Tim there. So, yeah, so again, they're designed for very different uses. And so that's just kind of how they start designing the engine. They'll take into those things into consideration. An engine on an expendable rocket, well, all right, I shouldn't say it because shuttle wasn't expendable, but during a shuttle flight profile, the RS-25 is only fired for one burn, and then after that, they were not used for the remainder of the mission. You had other propulsion systems for your orbital maneuvering and
right.
your deorbit burn and stuff. So, yeah, so I
Well,
hope that answers the question.
cool graphic from Tim for sure. And while we're
Yeah.
shouting out other creators, good luck, Joe Bernard. I think I might be too late, but I know he's launching his Lumineer rocket probably like right now. So good luck to him, and
Oh yeah. Someone
good
give us
luck
an
to
update how
Lumineer.
that's going. When we're all
Yes,
done the show, we're all gonna go raid BPS Space's stream. Okay.
yeah,
We're got like what 7 minutes left, so
yeah.
we're gonna do that, I think. But we get some more questions here about Starship as always, asking how much of SN20 has been constructed. I think I have a video to show for this. Yes, because of course, if there are pieces of SN20 to be shown, we know Mary found video of it. I believe that is this very first clip. Yes, that is a forward dome to Starship SN20, which is expected to be the first Starship that flies to orbit. So there, that part. Jack, do you know off the top of your head, are there other components of SN20 out and about? I think we've seen others.
Not off the top of my head, but I do want to point out about this dome that we're looking at, this forward dome. I know maybe it's just placebo or confirmation bias or whatever, but I feel like every single time we have a new piece of hardware like this, it just looks distinctly and obviously better. And,
Yeah,
maybe
no, it
if
totally
you
does.
hadn't told me it was SN20, I might not think that. I don't know. Maybe we should do like a double blind scientific study or
Yeah,
something.
there you go.
But really, even with SN15, SN15 looks great compared to even SN11. It's just something about it, something about their improvements in the manufacturing process, uh, is distinctly visible. And so that SN20 forward dome looks amazing. And yeah, I'm not sure if there's more parts of it. If they're doing the forward dome, they're probably also making barrel sections and whatnot inside the tents. I mean, you can bet whether or not that we've seen those parts. They're actively being constructed or planned right now. Look at that. See, I mean, Holy cow! Look at that thrust dome. I think that's a super heavy thrust dome. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's super. There's too many Raptor connections for it to not be super heavy, right?
yeah, and it's flatter. It's flatter
Hmm.
than you would expect the Starship thrust domes to be. And again, this one I think is the second or third one that we've seen. I'm not sure what booster number it's slated for, but it just looks so clean and so good. And so you can obviously see that their manufacturing processes are improving and they are iterating rapidly and just getting better and better.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating to see how that go. And I do think like I don't think it's just like oh, or in our minds we're making them seem like they look better. I think they are legitimately part of building all these prototypes is you'll get better manufacturing processes and it'll come out cleaner and stuff like that. I think you're totally right there. Um, got some super chats that have come through here really quick. Our
Was
Roland's
that a
here with a couple. Oh, go ahead.
did that car that just went by have somebody waving in it at the camera? Sorry, it was like a blue Tesla looking vehicle that just went by. Like, anyways, go on with your more
Well,
pertinent
now I'm
discussion.
gonna wait till it comes through again because now I want to know what you were talking about.
All right, we'll wait
But
for it. Wait for it.
Were they waving at Mary, maybe? Or
Yeah,
yeah, mate.
probably
Was there someone waving
oh,
right
there? I
there.
I
can't
didn't see
tell.
it.
I
The
couldn't
right in
tell if
front
that
of
was
the.
waving or not. It was really
Anyways,
fast. Roland says, you got a couple ones. Says, when will we build a space elevator? And then follows up with, how about a space fountain? What's a space fountain? I know what a space elevator is.
I
Space
have
Yeah,
fountain
no
you
sounds
idea.
got
like you need
me.
a lot of
You
water
got me.
pressure. I don't know if that's the words.
Maybe like using laser as propulsion or something, and they count that as a fountain. I don't know.
Oh wait, no, he's got a third one. Roland, thank you so much for all this. These are all super chats, so thank you so much. Use accelerated matter to counter gravity on a tall structure that reaches into space. Sure, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not familiar. What were we talking about last stream? DOS was like something something carbon nanotubes for a space elevator or something like that. Roland, thank you for the super chat support there. And then Robert Pello with the $20 super chat. Thank you so much. Appreciate.
I figured it was a Dogecoin thing. Oh, Thomas, did we lose you?
Oh,
You must not talk ill of
uh-oh. I
chat.
think we I
Can
think
you
we
guys still
messed with
hear
the space
Thomas?
fountain.
Yeah, don't
I
mess
mean,
with the space fountain,
don't
much like
mess with the
Texas.
space fountain. Yeah.
All right, well, just a second, we'll get Thomas back. No worries. No, Thomas, you
Uh-oh,
are.
I'm back.
There he goes.
Wait, guys, can you hear
Hey,
me
Okay.
now?
Yes.
chat. Can you hear Thomas?
Well, I could.
Oh, I
I
can't hear
got
you.
you
Oh,
for a
there we
second.
go. Can you guys
All
hear me
right.
all right now?
Yes. You're
Sorry
back.
about that. I don't know what happened, but we're back. I was in the middle. What was I in the middle of talking about? Where did I get cut off?
Uh,
Something nanotubes, space fountain.
Okay,
Not
so
very.
sorry
Oh,
about that.
the going to the moon very soon tweet from Elon. I figured that was
Okay,
a Dogecoin
that's the
reference,
other
but
thing I was thinking of. I was like, is that just a stock meme? I don't know. Wait, sorry about that. I don't know what just happened, but I think I got back in time.
no worries.
Mitchell, thanks for the super chat there. And then another super chat here from Mike saying, "Do we know why Crew Dragon's interior side windows are blocked off from the outside view?" Yeah, they moved some of the. It was like something involving the Super Draco pods actually covers a couple of the windows where the windows would have been at least. Um, I don't know. There are plenty of windows. There's been a lot of really good photos actually from Crew Dragon crew members like out Dragon's windows, and there's some really cool photos that have come from that. I think it's just they tweaked the design of the crew cabin a little bit during development. Let's see. Let's take like one more Starship question we've got here. Um, Asking when do you guys think that BN1 will exit the high bay? I was expecting that to happen after SN15 rolled out. So we know BN1 is likely not going to be a flight test article anymore. That's just for some manufacturing prototyping. They might not even do ground testing with it because they've been already changed that design a bit. Um, that being said, they need to get it out of the high bay so they can stack other things. And then we're expecting BN2 to come up soon. Any speculation as to when we might see some super heavy testing?
Honestly, I'm at a loss. I'm not quite sure how long that will take. But selfishly, as someone who is enjoying a nice short break right now, I'm glad that BN1 is being scrapped. I do think it'll exit the high bay, either in pieces or as a whole. We'll just have to sort of wait and see. I'm also wondering if they'll get the crane set up in time, or if they'll have to do that wacky like Tankzilla lifting through the high bay roof type situation, like
Mhm.
they did for BN1 stacking, or if they will have a solution for that. But yeah, it's hard to say when the next BN will be assembled and tested. They've got pieces for it, but I think at this point they're gonna have to get booster number 1 out of the way and scrapped first.
Gotcha. Well, I think that is going to do it for the time we have today. Thank you, everyone, so much for tuning in for this week's episode of NASA Spaceflight Live. Thank you to all of the questions. I think we got to answer a good chunk of them, but of course, we never get to all of them. So our social media handles are here on the bottom here, both myself and Jack. So if you have more questions that we didn't get to, please feel free to reach out on Twitter, and we'll try to continue the conversation over there. But I want to give a big thank you, especially to all of the super chat questions that have come through. Thank you to all of those support. And a big thank you to all of our YouTube members. I want to give a special thank you to our launch directors and flight engineers. Oh my goodness, the font's smaller again. Every time we come to this page, the font on the page has to be smaller. Thank you all so much for all of your very generous support for the channel. It allows us to keep doing what we do and upgrading and improving our coverage. So a huge thank you. And
Yeah.
even if you just come in and tune in and hang out and chat and watch these shows, we appreciate you just the same. Again, couldn't be doing it without any of you guys. Mr. Jack Beyer, thank you so much for joining us for this week's show.
No sweat. I think maybe we need to record like all of the names, someone saying all the names on the launch director and whatnot list,
Okay.
and then we'll just compress it into like a half a second long, like a high frequency burst, like a data burst. I don't know, something there. But either way, thanks to all the members. Thank you to all of everyone just for watching today, and thank you to all my patrons
Yeah.
on Patreon. I can't say thanks enough for helping me do what I do. And there's a link in chat to the Joe Bernard Lumineer stream if you guys want to go raid that with us afterwards, because I know where I'm going next.
I'm going there too. Really quick, Philip Sloss, another thank you to you joining our stream today again, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks everybody for watching.
All right, that is going to do it to this week's episode of NASA Spaceflight Live. Also, I thank you to Michael Baylor handling the production in the background as always. But thank you so much for joining us. Stay with us this coming week for likely some Starship testing live streams if they're getting ready to spool that up, as well as, of course, other NASA Spaceflight coverage here on both on the YouTube channel and over at NASASpaceflight.com. But until next time, Thomas Burghardt here, signing off. See you next time.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
Alright, the chamber pressure looks good. Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantic. Flight outside of speed off. Off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.